The Accessibility Breakdown by Inclusion Impact Accessibility.
Hey, welcome to the Accessibility Breakdown. I am Mark, and this is
Justin.
Every week we pay tribute to those who stand out to us as leading by accessibility by picking three topics that strike us in some way. This week we're going to talk about plain language is an accessibility feature. This is by a friend of mine, Jeff Adams. Jeff and I worked together on the accessibility maturity model. And this is I really appreciate this article. We'll get into it. The next thing we'll talk about is, will the web accessibility specialist become the next unicorn job? And this is our second one by A11Y Explained. And then the final one is, we have a return to office problem and disability workers are paying for it. And this is by Taylor. Pronounce the last name.
Arndt?
Arndt?
A-R-N-D-T, yeah.
A-R-N-D-T. So Justin, it's been a minute. You and I both were out. I was at a wedding. You were at a vacation in the same state.
Right.
So Justin and I were chatting one day, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to be away in Michigan in a few weeks for a wedding. And he's like, Minnesota. Thank you. Minnesota. Something with an I. Something with an I.
You had such a great time, you blamed a different state.
Yeah. You know why? My wife keeps messing it up. I want to blame it on her. I probably shouldn't do that. But it's like we keep correcting each other back and forth. So we're all sorts of confused. But then you're like, oh, what a coincidence. We're leaving out the day before you, flying out the day before you to go to Minnesota. And we both flew back on the same day. I had a better time than you did, though, because you got stuck in the airport. And you were a little sleepy yesterday, but today you're doing good.
Oh my gosh. 10 hours of sleep and some ibuprofen. Mwah. Chef's kiss.
New person. You're a new person. So, yeah, and that was in the midst of one of the radars went down right after we landed. So a lot of guests coming in were affected by this radar outage in Minnesota that delayed flights. It was out for an hour and 45 minutes, which it's just a whole cascading mess. But anyways, enough about that. We're back in action, and we're going to talk about plain language is an accessibility feature by Jeff Adams. And Jeff Adams has a great series of blog posts on Discord. Am I remembering that right? So go check out he's a fantastic writer. And this is about writing. So this is a really good one on brand. And as soon as he posted something on this subject, like my ears perked up, because it was like, okay, if Jeff is talking about this, he's an authority on writing. So we got to figure this out. And he and I work together on the accessibility maturity model, which is the APA working group with W3C. It's one of their subgroups where we create a model for understanding an organization's capability to deliver mature digital assets and where those gaps might be, so that you can create a roadmap to close those gaps. That's all I'll say about that. But Jeff and I work closely together on that. It's, we do a lot of writing back and forth kind of stuff. So you hear a lot about the importance of plain language writing. And what I really appreciate about this article is it kind of gives you the why, and it gives you the why in the context of accessibility, which you might go like, oh, well, that's obvious, right? But it actually comes up with some stuff that's not so obvious. So before I dive into anything, Justin, I want to hear what you thought about this article and what resonated with you.
I liked it. Plain language is one of those areas where, I don't know, it kind of like flies under the radar. Like it's like it really should be a requirement, but it's not. Or we just don't pay enough attention to it. But it's funny because as I was reading the article, I both got a little frustrated with like the kind of the amount of like you do that thing where like you look at something and you're like, oh, I just kind of want to like maybe like quickly scan this, or I want
Mm-hmm.
to kind of quickly read through it. And you, as you're going, you might be scanning down the page and you see like these long blocks of text, and you're just like, all right, now let me get through this. But because he used plain language, like, and he wrote to a well, the eighth grade level is what you typically kind of focus on. He like it was really easy to get through those big blocks of text that he had written. And so there's a part of me that was like at like I would see those big blocks of text and I would see them kind of coming as I'm like visually scanning the page and reading down, and I'd be like, oh, here comes a big block of text, but you'd fly through it.
Right.
And you're just like, oh, okay, and you're just kind of reading, and so it ups your reading comprehension. But if you're also a visual scanner, it might also frustrate you. So I was kind of torn between like kind of these two ways that I read. Uh,
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point here, and that's that the article itself is actually a really good example of the article's content, which he
yes,
discloses in the article. He
yeah,
he says like, I scan this article, it comes in at eighth grade. And I think, for me it's kind of an interesting the whole thing's an interesting exercise because there's a lot of science and a lot of subjectivity when it comes to plain language writing. It's kind of one of those things that falls into that category of like I know it when I see it,
hmm
but it can be somewhat difficult to describe what it is or what you need to do to get there. Although there's some very specific rules that help you get there. It's like it's a little bit all over the place, and so the article has some great practical suggestions for plain language writing, like cutting long sentences in two, watching your subclauses. One of the ones that this is probably me right here, is swapping inflated words for plain ones. And it's like the word utilize, it's just the word use. Just use the word use. Use the word use.
hmm
In order to, as a phrase, to, just the word to. And at this point in time is now, these are his examples that I'm going through. And that to me is just a really, there's a lot of really good examples. And then just the way that he goes through and also says like, he gives you kind of the bullet point of this helps people with cognitive disabilities, people whose first language may be different than the language that the article is written in. And then my favorite is he's like, yeah, if you're distracted or tired, which is everybody, right? And this is going to come back in the next
that's
article
me.
that we talk about, because one of the other things, or not the next one, but the last one we talk about, I'm going to tie these two together because they tie together. So he mentions two things in the article that you can use, and this addresses that subjectivity versus rules versus all of that. But there's two things you can use, and the free versions of these things are really good. One is called Hemingway Editor, and the other one is Pro Writing Aid. So I downloaded these for an article I'm writing right now. I'm writing an article on our remediation calculator and the math behind it, so people can understand the level of effort, how to figure out the level of effort to remediate prior to and after receiving an accessibility audit. And it was just amazing the things that I didn't realize that these two writing aids kind of pointed out to me. And but in both cases, they scored my initial draft as a eighth grade level.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So the other great point in here for me was you never get it the first time. You've got to, and this is, I feel like, the eighth
Oh,
grade English teacher here, you've got to edit. There's no such thing as good writing. There is good editing, right? Good writing comes in multiple editing passes. So you write whatever you write, but going back through reading aloud, I use a screen reader. I listen back with a screen reader. All these things can be techniques for understanding when you've kind of made a sentence. It's too complicated.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I'm starting to use now are like some tools like Whisperflow and like that does like AI dictation.
Mm-hmm.
And so like it kind of got me thinking too of around like as I'm dictating like notes or like something like whatever it is that I'm working on, like can I boil that down? Like can I send that off to something like a Hemingway or some
Mm-hmm.
sort of like reading checker to based on whatever I'm doing. It's like one of the things that I've been working on is documentation for a product that we have not fully released yet, but is coming. And um, and so I'm working on the documentation for that, and I'm just dictating it through Whisperflow, and it's going pretty well. But now I need to go back through and do plain language on it. But
Right.
Whisperflow is so great at kind of like as you're talking, it'll like get rid of your ums and ahs and all these little things, and
Mm-hmm.
it'll boil it down to how, kind of put it into the box that you designed for it. Um, can I make plain language part of that box? So that as I'm dictating, it's automatically doing that for me. Kind of a neat idea. It's not something I had really considered, but something I'm going to look into.
Yeah, I just pulled this up because I haven't heard of Whisperflow. That's a great tip. Um, so it's interesting. And does it have a good free version?
Free version gets you like so many words per, you know, it's good for like some basic stuff. Like if you needed to do an article or two here or there, it'll probably get you through that. Anything if you're using it daily, you're gonna need to
You're gonna want to pay for it.
pay for it.
Gotcha. All right. Well, good. Anything else you want to say about Jeff's article? Plain language is an accessibility feature.
Only tangentially. When you sent me this article, so over my little vacation that we just had here in Minnesota,
In
I
Minnesota,
picked
yeah.
up I picked up a book that's been in my everyone's been talking about it in my feeds and stuff like that. Dungeon Crawler Carl. Um, and so that was my vacation read,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just kind of like reading through it, and it's a very fast read. So much so that I looked down at one point and I saw, because I do a lot of reading on like a Kindle or like through Libby or something like that. And I looked down and I was like, I'm 50% of the way through this book. How big is this physical book? So I actually had to go and look to see how big the physical book was to think like, is it a little book? Is it a big, like, what is it? And the author, Matt Denneman, I think is his name. Uh, I mean, it's it is written. It's not a young adult book or anything like that, but the way that he writes makes it such a fast read, and I couldn't help but think of some of the overlaps as I was reading that book, and then also about plain language, like it's well written, it's a fun read, but at the same time, there's not a lot of jargony, confusing words or things
Right.
like that in there.
Overused prose or anything like that.
Overused prose, it's very concise, it
Mm-hmm.
reads really quick, and so I was kind of like, I mean, you don't want to throw an entire book into Hemingway, but it did kind of make me wonder, like, what was the reading level
It'd be fun to
for
take a pages here and there, just throw them in and see what.
and just see.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, great. I appreciate this one just as a person with dyslexia. Like it resonates with me, and particularly when I'm trying to read stuff for work. If I'm reading for pleasure, maybe it's a little bit different of a thing. But I appreciated the way that this was sort of broken down. It's a quick read. It's a quick read. This article, and I think it's one of those things that everybody should read. So let's go into will web accessibility specialists become the next unicorn job? And this is from A11Y Explained. And do you remember I forgot to look up the person's name. Deanna. I don't know that we figured out Deanna's last name yet or not, but Deanna has this Substack A11Y Explained, and does some great content. We've talked about some of her other content before, and she speculates about web web accessibility specialist or web SME, right? Subject matter expert, becoming the next unicorn job. And the real meat of this article is that because I think of things like Title II, HHS, these rules, and everything else, where people are trying to not only conform to WCAG, but also trying to figure out ways to sustain that conformance. They're like, well, we need to hire an accessibility specialist. And what's happening is they're looking for this person to be a single magic pill, if you will, for the organization.
Unicorns.
What's that?
We prefer the term unicorn.
Unicorns. Because the list of skills is like it starts to read like the list of roles in the organization. Like they've got to be a strategist, a developer, all these things, and it's a bit of a broken record, and which is actually why I like this article, because it approached this broken record in another way, which maybe will resonate with folks, but accessibility needs to be baked in to all the roles in your organization. You need to, as an organization, understand accessibility and provide resources, training, job descriptions, all of it. I mean, this is the work that we do with the accessibility with the maturity model, right? Is understanding where this is. There's just no shortcuts. And these job posts are starting. we want Gandalf, please. Can we have Gandalf as our accessibility wizard, and he can wave his wand at everything and fix everything? And it's just not realistic.
Well, I get where the companies are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reactionary hire. It's we already have all of our resources dedicated to these other functions. Let's bring in someone that knows accessibility and can coach up teams and can do all these things, but also isn't going to stop feature development or any of these other things, but can get into the code and can make the changes that need to be made, but at the same time can be talking to directors and others about how to inform. Like, it's a big role, and you can't do, like, you look at that type of role and that's not going to be your everyday. Like, you're not going to be bouncing between all those different roles all the time. But if you have those types of things in your toolbox and you can talk to them during an interview or something like that, then it makes it easier for them to kind of bring someone in that can kind of like do a little bit here, do a little bit there. You're really, I always refer to them as like smoke jumpers. Like, you're jumping in to something that is on fire and you're trying to put out all these little fires at the same time rather than handling like the blaze, which is like, if you were just like the accessibility person, it's a fire all around you and you're kind of like, you're just going to like not be able to do what it is. Like, you're going to be put into a position where you're not going to be able to really make change within the organization. But if you have all of these little skills, and they're not little by any means, but if you have this wide skill set, then you can come in and you can talk to all these different places. But there's not a lot of people that can do that.
Right. Well, I look at it like when you and I come in and we do a maturity assessment for an organization, you and I have very different skill sets. We have common accessibility pieces. So it takes the two of us, and then oftentimes we're even bringing other folks into the mix, because there's so many different things to think of. And we're very specifically working with the different roles in the organization to understand and inform them in terms of how accessibility affects them in their jobs and the things they need to do. So it's sort of, by design, not a single person thing, So anyways, I thought it was a really good angle on this drum that we keep beating about the necessity of integrating accessibility into the organization. I agree with you. I understand why, but it's just going to take time for organizations to learn what accessibility really takes, and they will.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, right? So the last one we have here is by Taylor Arndt. We have a return to office problem, and disabled workers are paying for it. And this was kind of, you hear a lot right now about return to work, right? Because a lot of people in the government are being mandated to return to work after being able to work from home due to the pandemic. And this article argues that the pandemic kind of created this opportunity for a lot of people to work from home, and was a forced experiment that proved out that could be very productive. But now for a variety of reasons, and there's a lot of speculation in the article. I don't know. I'd have to look at the research. I don't know how much I'm willing to sort of commit to those being the reasons, but there are things like, like the local coffee shop, all these things that were driven by people being in an office building, leaving the office building, consuming, lunch, blah, 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 blah. All this stuff, that there's pressure to return, utilize these buildings, move things back into these businesses. Maybe that's the case, right? I actually, I'd love to see the actual research on productivity. I've seen some of it, and I know that it can be very productive. But here's one of the things that struck me about this article is that it talked about the office distractions. So in 2013, I went from working in an office to working solely from home. With my ADD and my dyslexia, my productivity doubled. No commute. No, hey, how was your weekend? How was your night? Nobody showing up to my desk saying, I messed something up. Can you come take a look at it? How do I fix it? Like none of those flybys and drop-bys at the desk. No conversations going on 3 cubicles over to pull my attention. And I became productive like I had never been in my career. And it's funny because in Jeff Adams' article, he mentions the distractions in the office and why that 8th grade plain language writing is so important, because the average person is dealing with those competing distractions. Right? So two articles really highlight the competing distractions that exist in an office place, particularly, just that cubicle environment just absolutely kills me. And the intention, like if I want to talk to you, typically I'm teamsing you and are you available? And you can ignore it for a minute, finish what you're doing, go over to it. You know what I mean? And that to me is a much better and more focused experience.
Yeah.
So
I've been working remotely since 2008. So before it was cool. And even before then, we kind of had like a little remote office. But it's been, while there are days where going into an office, like I remember those days, and it's always, there was a lot of camaraderie. There was, there are things that in an office, and this is one of the pieces that Taylor does point out, like there are times when being face to face in an office setting
is important,
and it will raise the productivity for that moment. But for the day-to-day stuff where we're all churning through, the works as assigned, no, you don't need to be there. Like you don't, the distractions the distractions to your day outweigh the cost of
Right.
being able, for managers to be able to manage or to see people and their, butts in chairs, that sort of stuff. So yeah,
And it's for sure job dependent, like there's certain jobs you have to be at work for and all that. Taylor uh, is a person who's blind. And one of the big points the real purpose of this article, we shouldn't get too far away from it here, is that for people with disabilities, it can be the difference between a job they can get to and not get to, like just to say it direct and plain. And Taylor gives a lot of really good examples of like dangerous commutes for a person who's blind, calling an Uber to get in, having the Uber cancel. As a person who's not blind and just used Uber traveling or whatever, I've had, I got home one night. I was supposed to be home by like 11 o'clock and I was home at like 2:30 in the morning because of Uber canceling and stuff like that. So I can't imagine having to rely on that every single day and how that might make you late to work, late to meetings, all these kind of things. And that's just a couple of examples, right? From Taylor's lived experience. But it really did a good job of just highlighting how it can absolutely mean almost the difference between employment and not employment for a person with a disability.
absolutely.
And that if you're just blanket making these like everybody back to work and you don't have sort of a real plan around it and you're not thinking it through and you're not talking to individuals, that you probably have a lot of people who are polishing up their resumes and trying to get somewhere else because it's just a non-starter for them.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
anything else?
No, there was one point that Taylor made,
Mm-hmm.
um, that Taylor made. Um,
Golf clubs.
uh,
Golf club reference.
golf. Yeah. Not that I play golf.
So that will be the only golf reference you probably get from Justin and I, just so that you know. Not
Um,
a big golf group over here.
yeah. So one of the things that she points out in her article is about how accessibility is also about policy
Mm-hmm.
and making sure that we have accessibility included in policy conversations, that accommodations, HR, is everyone involved in that, and so make just wanted to point out again that if you are someone who is working on policies for your organization or is, if you're in HR or anything like that, make sure to bring it up next time
Mm.
one of these mandates gets announced, so that it's called out, so that it's, essentially on the record that, hey, we have folks that are blind, that are vision, that may have difficulty getting into the office. How is this mandate to return to an office setting going to affect them? Like if someone just brings it up, that's going to force HR, corporate directors, whatever,
Think about it.
to
Consider
to
it.
recognize it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's a really good point, and I would extend that, right? Like when you're thinking about policy, get your folks with disabilities and a bunch of other people into a room and really determine how it's going to affect them, affect everyone. All right. Well, good job, Justin. Back from
you did a good
vacation,
job
10
too.
hours of sleep, a couple of Advil. Good work. All right. Any last minute thoughts?
Nope,
All
I'm
right.
good. Happy
Well, thanks
weekend.
everybody for listening. Now that we have broken down accessibility for you, we hope that you go forth and keep it accessible.
Thank you for listening to the Accessibility Breakdown by Inclusion Impact Accessibility.